This episode is brought to you by Fuli Gemstones.
The zip is a very interesting creation. The idea was born in 1938 at a time where Elsa Schiaparelli was using the zip in fashion. At that time, the Maison's artistic director was Renée Puissant. She was the daughter of the founding couple. And she decided to create a jewel inspired by the zip fastener, which was quite bold. You know, it was this element that was
utilitarian. It was
absolutely
useful, but not remotely beautiful or decorative.
And it took over 12 years to the Maison to actually create it because it was so complex in its technology.
Welcome to If Jewels Could Talk. I'm Carol Woolton, the voice of jewellery, an author, broadcaster, and the woman who initiated the role of jewellery editor at magazines like Tatler and British Vogue. This is a podcast for everyone, for people who do like jewellery, for people who don't realise they like jewellery, and anyone intrigued by fascinating facts, new ideas, and forgotten histories. So please join me as I tell sparkly tales, meeting all sorts of people, delving into 4 centuries of jewellery culture, and investigate what's happening now. Today we are talking about the French Maison Van Cleef Arpels. There have been 2 important moments recently. The first was about 10 days ago when the Queen Consort was signing the Declaration of Accession with her husband, King Charles III. And on her wrist, as she signed, was a lapis lazuli Alhambra bracelet by Van Cleef. We all know that King Charles is very passionate about architecture, and the Alhambra is a symbol that you see. It's sort of like the 4-leaf clover symbol that you see on Gothic and Renaissance and Islamic architecture. The second thing we're celebrating is the opening of a new exhibition on the art of movement, their first standalone exhibition in London at the Design Museum. So please join me in the Design Museum. So in 1895, when Estelle Arpels married Alfred Van Cleef, the celebrated high jewellery Maison Van Cleef Arpels established itself and very quickly established its reputation across the world, not only as a world of beauty but also harmony. And when I think of the brand of Van Cleef Arpels, I think of something of absolute beauty and showing things at the spirit of things rather than reality. So roses never have thorns, birds don't have claws, dancers never get tired. But today we are talking on the eve of their first solo exhibition in London about the specific bond of Van Cleef Arpels with the art of movement. So I'm delighted to have Lise Macdonald, Van Cleef Arpels Director of Patrimony and Exhibitions, who has just guided me through the exhibition, which opens tomorrow, and is going to tell me more about Van Cleef, the history, and this specific link with movement.
Thank you so much. Yes, indeed. We wanted to look at this angle of the movement in our creations since the Maison's foundation, Place Vendôme in 1906, until more recent creations. And obviously it's a very wide topic. So when we thought about how can we convey this idea of the movement through over 100 years creation, we looked at it from a thematical approach. And therefore we've organized this exhibition like a stroll across different thematics such as nature, couture, dance, obviously, and more abstract movements. Indeed, this notion of kinetism, of movement, is very present in all the creations of the Maison, whether it's a flight of a bird that is captured in its full dynamism, or a fleeting moment of a composition of flowers where you really see that sense of eternity has been given in this composition. So this exhibition is quite interesting in the way that these time elements are merged together in different decades. So a showcase can represent pieces from the 1920s, as well as the 1980s, 90s, or even 50s all together. And we've looked at it from a very specific angle, such as bouquets or cords or bows or the influence of modernism. And so we really wanted to convey to the audience in the UK and in London in particular this very wide array of expressions around this notion of movement.
I think when people listen and they hear the word cord and they're thinking of gold and stones and the hardest materials known to man, like diamonds, they must find it very hard to imagine how that moves. I was really interested to know from you, Lise, why movement's so important in a jewel. Why do Van Cleef have to inject this sense of movement? What's important about it?
Well, when you look at jewellery, obviously, as you well said, it's a medium that looks at hard stones and very complex materials to work on. It's a bit like a sculpture. How do you convey this idea of animation, of being alive in a composition? And I think that's the quest of the Maison since its foundation, is to give life, to bring an element of poetry, an element of beauty that is eternal. And movement does capture that. So it's translated in different ways, whether it's through the interplay of materials, colored gemstones, the way the gold is worked. It's also added with the way the light shines on the stones and the composition, how the light is captured. And finally, I would say how the play of composition, the use of asymmetry, will provide this movement. It's a bit like in music, you have moments of silence and moments of play where you can see you can hear the different instruments all play together. Well, it's the same thing in art and in composition, in visual compositions. And it does provide that dynamism and a sense of being alive. It's extremely complex to do. It requires agility, it requires knowledge, craftsmanship, and also an artistic eye to be able to say that, okay, this composition, I will make it asymmetrical. I will play with the fact that the center is decentered. And by just doing this little twist, you create life.
Because it's amazing that the mystery setting, which Van Cleef & Arpels really transformed 20th century jewellery setting, taking out as much visible metal as possible in channels of coloured stones. That, for instance, to me, has always looked like a river. It's like a river of stones with a sort of velvety texture. So in some way, although it's a channel of stones, it does appear to move.
Absolutely. The mystery set was actually patented by the Maison in 1933. It's a technique where no prongs are visible. So the setting appears like mysterious, hence the name mystery set. It also is a play with the colored stones. So often it's done in rubies, but you can also find some mystery set in sapphire and more rarely in emerald, because the emerald is a stone that is very hard to work. It can break very easily. Mystery set stones are cut on the side extremely thinly, less than 0.2 of a millimeter. So you can imagine how easily it can break the stone. Only a handful of people know how to master this technique, and really Van Cleef & Arpels is the Maison who has created this technique and continues to do it until today in contemporary creations. The way the light reflects on mystery set, as you well said, is really like a flow of water or a velvety aspect to the composition, which gives depth, which gives emotion, which brings poetry to a composition where nobody knows, when you don't know the technique, how actually it is made.
And it's very weird to use that word emotion, but it does happen. And actually just viewing the exhibition, coming to the first showcase with mystery set sapphires, there's a bellflower and a chestnut leaf, and they just get to you. You look at them and it actually does really evoke an emotion, and I don't know why, but jewellery can do that. I don't think it's just me. I think there are plenty of other people who feel that when they see something like that, and it just touches them in some way.
It's interesting you mentioned the bellflower, because I have to agree with you. I think this composition is extremely interesting in the way the jewelers have selected the way the stones would be cut and positioned in those two flowers. When you look at it, you have the inside of the flower and the outside of the flower that is exactly reproduced the reversed way on the other flower next to it. So you have this notion of depth, this notion of perspective that is given just by the interplay of the color combination that is transformed from one flower to another. And that gives an unexpected composition. You know, you would think that the inside would be exactly the same on the two flowers, yet it's not. And I think that by looking at that, when you really focus on the piece and you let your imagination and you let your eye look at the composition, you realize that it's extremely poetic, beautiful, elegant, and it does make you dream.
So when we're talking about movement, we have to talk about the fairies and the dancers who all appear to be moving. And I have to say, urge anyone, if they can get to London and have a look, because actually in this exhibition they do all dance and move, and you can't see how. It's a rather magical experience. So the celebrated dancers date back to about the 1920s, don't they? Lise Arpels had a great love of dance. Can you tell us a bit about that moment and how that happened?
So the love of the Arpels family for dance, in fact, yes, starts straight from the foundation of the Maison. The founding couple and the whole family that set up Van Cleef & Arpels was very much infatuated by dance and the arts in general. So yes, Louis Arpels, the brother of Estelle Arpels, was a great lover of ballet, and he would go to the Paris Opera and ballet, watch ballets all the time. The creations of ballerinas, such as fairies, started slightly later, at the beginning of the 1940s, so really in the middle of the Second World War. Those two figures, feminine figures, appeared in a period of uproar, of complexity, of very tense times. And Van Cleef & Arpels created those two feminine figures as positive visions of life. So they really came, to set their glitters upon us. Mm-hmm. In the exhibition, we have selected original drawings as well from our archives, and you can see three very beautiful drawings of fairies that fly in the sky, and that show how the Maison has studied and developed these compositions around femininity and fairies in particular. Dance is also a very important source of inspiration. Since, as I said, the 1940s until today, we continue to make ballerinas in our high jewellery workshops. Dance is a continuous field of inspiration, and in fact we think that Van Cleef & Arpels has done ballerinas just linked to classical ballet, but it's not really true. We also have done ballerinas and dances that are inspired by Asian dances. For example, in the archives, mm-hmm. we have Cambodian dancers. In the exhibition, you have a Balinese dancer as well, and even boogie woogie or jazz. French can, absolutely. So all dance expressions are part of the inspirations of the Maison.
I suppose the movement comes partly through the positions of the dancers. They're either holding their dress, they're pirouetting. There's a sort of volume through the skirts that they're lifting, and each one seems to be in a very different position.
Completely. It's all that together that gives the movement. It's, first of all, when you look at the ballerina's body from the 1940s, 50s, 60s, the body is made like a little line. The arms and the legs are very stylized. Yet the tutus can be represented in so many different ways, whether it's work of gold, whether it's interpretations of lace, whether it's colored stones that are put together, and you have often the inside of the tutu and the outside that are two different stones. So it gives also the idea of the volume of the perspective. Ballerinas are represented mainly in clips. So you have to imagine a lady wearing the clip. It can't be like a sculpture. It can't be, you can't turn around, even though the back of the clip is treated equally, with equal attention as the front, but it's still a piece that you see from the front or the side, but not from the back. So you have to give this notion of the volume. So how do you do that? And this is where the work of gemstones, of gem setting, cutting, as well as the jewellery all play a very important role.
And the realistic stance. So how does that happen? Do some of the designers go to the ballet? Do they draw dancers in motion?
We have in the archives absolutely studies of nude dancers in their different positions where you really see the anatomy.
But that's so interesting because you start with the naked form and then you dress her with gemstones.
And then you also go away from the naked form and you go to a more stylized, idealized representation of the dancer. There is one piece in the patrimonial collection that is a representation of a ballerina. It's actually Susan Farrell, who was the muse of Balanchine, with whom the Maison has an important connection. And we've made a representation of this ballerina in 1967 when she was dancing the ballet Jewels of Balanchine. And she was actually performing in the third act on Tchaikovsky music, the act that is focusing on diamonds. Mm-hmm. And so we've represented her in gold with a tutu of diamonds. And this is the only representation of a ballerina from the patrimonial collection where you can see the body that is represented more accurately. You really have an anatomy. When you look at the shoe, for example, you can see the tension and little pleats on the back of the shoe where you can see the weight and the tension of the body. In the other ballerinas, the body is stylized. The head is represented by often a rose-cut diamond. And it's interesting to see how this shape of a gem actually can reflect the face of a ballerina.
It's almost like the face is tilted up, sort of looking up to the seats above, around the balcony. It's almost like she's looking at her audience.
Absolutely, yeah.
And of course, jewels. You talked about Georges Balanchine, the famous choreographer, co-founder of the New York City Ballet, and he had a very close relationship with Claude Arpels.
Yes.
And was it Claude Arpels who suggested he created a ballet around jewellery?
The relationship between Claude Arpels and Balanchine was born after the Second World War. It is the violinist Nathan Milstein that introduced them. And from their friendship and mutual admiration, the ballet was born, Jewels. So a ballet in 3 acts, looking at 3 different gemstones, rubies, emeralds, and diamonds on 3 different music. So this ballet was really the encounter of those 2 creators, one in the world of jewellery, the other one in the world of dance.
And Balanchine, I think, said, the ballet has nothing to do with jewels, the dancers are just dressed like jewels. So they were dressed to look like emeralds, rubies, diamonds.
It is a ballet that looks at stones, at gems. It is, and of course the world of jewellery has its link to that, but it is a ballet that looks at gemstones.
So do you think he was recreating visually the ballerinas, the Van Cleef ballerinas?
We have no records that says that, and I'm not sure that was the real interpretation, that there must have been an emulation between Balanchine and Claude Arpels and Van Cleef & Arpels, more generally, that's for sure. However, it is not a retranscription of the ballerinas into ballet. It's really looking at stones, at gemstones, and an interpretation of Balanchine of those 3 gemstones. Now, Balanchine came to see the jewels of the Maison repeatedly. We have photographs of him looking at jewels in our shop, Place Vendôme, and as well as New York, where he would come and look at jewellery. We also have photographs in the archives showcasing Susan Farrell wearing some of the jewels. but it's a ballet that looks at gems more broadly. We have examples of ballerinas that are joined together a bit like a corps of ballet that create this swirling composition that is really linked to traditional ballet, classical ballet. In fact, one of the pieces of Van Cleef Arpels showcases a swirl of ballerinas as seen from above. So you can see the tutu that is deployed around the body of the ballerina. And that as you go, as the necklace unfolds on the back of the necklace, the composition becomes more and more abstract and transforms into a vortex. So this notion of movement that you can see from the top swirls around the neck and finishes into this abstract stylization of a tutu.
And Nicolas Beau, the chief executive of Van Cleef Arpels, has a great interest in dance, doesn't he?
Totally. The Maison has this very strong link with dance from the 1940s because of the creations of the first ballerinas, until the collaboration with Balanchine and more recently with Benjamin Millepied, who was the founder of the LA Dance Project and the former director of the Paris Opera. And very recently in London, Van Cleef Arpels launched Dance Reflection, which supports contemporary dance. And in March in London, where the many contemporary dance representations were given here. So yes, the link between the Maison and dance is extremely rich, important, and wide.
So that's also some way that people, I imagine, working in the design studio might have inspiration, because I guess with Nicolas sometimes they might be attending a dance class or attending the ballet and seeing this all in motion.
The studio and artists, I would say in general, get inspired by everything they see. So definitely dance and going to the ballet and looking at also at contemporary dance and studying the body and the movement of the body will be a very deep source of inspiration.
So Benjamin Millepied is married to Natalie Portman, who performed in the 2010 film Black Swan, and that gave a sort of sharper, more dramatic edge to the ballet scene. And I wonder, do you notice sometimes with the Van Cleef ballerinas, do they become more modern over time? Are they given modern interpretations?
The creations of the Maison are always anchored in a spirit of a time. It can also detach from the spirit of that time and be in the avant-garde, which has been many times the case for Van Cleef Arpels. It is clear that the contemporary ballerina have a different treatment as the ancient, the more older ballerinas of the 1950s or 40s, for sure. Especially, I would say, in the way the anatomy is represented. However, the source of inspiration remains the patrimony, and that's the beauty, of this Maison, is to look at the past and create a new interpretation anchored in the spirit of a time, and yet always linking it back to the past.
But the ballerinas still don't get sore feet.
No, they're ethereal. In fact, in the exhibition, we've made them magically float. So
I know, they look absolutely beautiful. They really do. It's very magical. And I thought the other thing that really captures your imagination is the idea of couture in jewels. And indeed, the exhibition starts basically with the idea of a long ribbon taking you through the exhibition.
Yes, we've worked with a designer, Jean-Baptiste Auvray from Agence Faire, and we've decided to start the exhibition with an anamorphosis of one of the pieces on display in the show, which is a silhouette clip. A very interesting piece from 1937, which is a hybridation between a bow and a flower. So couture themes have been very important sources of inspirations. Lace, ribbons, fabrics have always been deep inspirations for the Maison. The exhibition focuses on certain representations of couture. We have selected, for example, the famous zip necklace, which is one of the masterpieces of the patrimonial collection, the zip is a very interesting creation. The idea was born in 1938 at a time where Elsa Schiaparelli was using the zip in fashion, which was extremely rare at the time because zip fasteners were used at the end of the 19th century. It was created in the United States, and it wasn't used in bags. It was used on suits of workers.
Like aviator jackets.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. And Elsa Schiaparelli made the first move to integrate the zip into an element like decoration, practical element of fashion. At that time, the Maison's artistic director was Renée Puissant. She was the daughter of the founding couple. And she was a lady with a very strong sense of creativity, and she was very daring, and she really was at the heart of modernism. And she decided to create a jewel inspired by the zip fastener, which was quite bold. It was, this element that was
utilitarian. It was
absolutely
useful, but not remotely beautiful or decorative.
Absolutely not beautiful. And it took over 12 years to the Maison to actually create it because it was so complex in its technology.
And how involved was the Duchess of Windsor in this? Because there is the story that she was involved, inspired, or...
Yes, this is what the story says. We have no proof in the archive saying so, but orally the tradition says that it would have been the Duchess of Windsor saying to Renée Puissant to look at the zip fastener and to give her the idea of creating this necklace.
Because they were great clients.
They
the
were.
Duke and Duchess of Windsor.
Yes, absolutely. She had a wonderful collection of jewellery, not just Van Cleef & Arpels, and she had several pieces from Van Cleef & Arpels, but she never had a zip
So it's unlikely then, isn't it, that she was...
We don't know.
Because if she was so involved and interested, she would have bought one, surely.
We don't know.
So Renée Puissant perfected this art of engineering, really, to make the zip.
So it's the studio and the jewelers that did. She patented. The Maison patented the zip fastener in 1938, and the very first zip appeared in 1950. And you have examples on display of 1952. So very very early creations of the zip. The zip is a piece of jewelry that is also versatile. It can transform and be worn as a necklace or as a bracelet.
And always has a tassel.
The
tassel is the pearl.
Yes, it has a tassel, and the way the tassel is interpreted and made is, of course, a variation of drawings. So every zip is a unique piece. And yes, it requires a lot of skill to make them, and we continue to make zip today in our high jewellery workshop, Place Vendôme.
There's a very early example of a tassel, a 1925 bracelet, where there was a very early tassel with diamonds.
Yes, this is a lovely piece. We have two on display, and it's a stunning composition because you can see the movement on the tassel because it's completely articulated. The two bracelets, one is in platinum, diamond, and rubies, and the other one is using emeralds. It's a typical work from the 20s, the roaring 20s, where you can see this fluidity, the reference to draperies, to cloth, to passementerie, trimmings, fabrics, all these elements were very, very appreciated at that time and continued across the decades. And so, yes, there are lovely examples. What's very sweet in this showcase is that you can see these two bracelets from the Roaring 20s, and just next to them you have a composition from the 1990s looking at how fabric has been reinterpreted into gold. And it's interesting to see how this thematic of couture has been relevant throughout decades and treated in such different ways and with different sources of inspiration, whether it's trimming or whether it's a scarf that is reinterpreted into jewellery.
And do you think some of that, treating it in different ways, part of that is interpreting the way women live and how they've always lived and showing those changes?
Jewellery is linked to the spirit of the time, to obviously to fashion. You wear jewellery on the body, and so the time you live in has a deep impact on how the jewellery is going to be made. Obviously, if you cover your ears, the earrings will disappear. If in the 1990s, in this example of the scarf necklace, you could see that the fashion of the ladies at the time was wearing jackets and with very strict lines, and the jewels started to shorten and to be closer to the neck, and so it accompanies the look of the fashion and the accessories will follow that trend or work together with that trend. So obviously there is a link between the trends, between the period and the evolution also of taste and of arts in general, not just decorative arts or fashion, but arts in general. Mm-hmm. And you can see links between jewellery and, for example, furniture making, or even fine arts. It's all one, it's all a systemic approach of a time, which is very hard to analyze when you're in your own time.
It's only in retrospect that you see it.
That's why we look at the past and we stop when it's too contemporary, because then it's another thing.
Well, I think it's amazing with such a rich archive that you can look at those moments, because I was reading that one of the earliest Van Cleef & Arpels objets was a bell push for the butler, made in 1908. And I think when you look at that, and then you look at the Alhambra that was created at the time of student riots in the 1960s and women wanting more liberation, more independence, it's so interesting that you have that documented in jewellery.
Yes, completely. The Maison has done jewellery, high jewellery pieces, watches as well, and objects. And indeed, one of the very first objects that we've created is the Varuna boat, and it's a beautiful object of art. It's the exact copy of a yacht that belonged to Eugene Higgins. And you can see this boat that is made of gold and enamel that is sailing on a sea of jasper. And it was an object, a decorative object that was put on a table. And you have indeed the bell of a butler that is hidden on the top of one of the chimneys of the boat. But you can see this evolution of interpretations going from objects of art to more precious objects, to accessories, to jewelry, high jewelry, and of course watches as well, throughout the decades and the centuries. That evolves.
Not much call for the butler bell push these days.
Nope, it's different.
But of course we've had a huge Alhambra moment in the UK over the last week, because the new Queen Consort signed all the documents of accession with King Charles III. Close-ups everywhere of her Alhambra bracelet on her wrist. She's quite devoted to that motif, isn't she?
Apparently so, yes.
It's amazing.
Yes. Well, it's a motif that was created in 1968. So yes, it was a moment where the jewels were very long. You could wear very long pendants or sautoir, and the Alhambra is a motif of a clover, and it's a symbol of luck. So we've continued until today to develop this iconic piece of Van Cleef & Arpels.
So it must be The luck must mean something to King Charles and Queen Camilla. That's great. So I hope she keeps it on her wrist because they need luck going forward, actually. So we're very happy that she'll have that clamped to her wrist as her sort of lucky four-leaf clover. And I think it seems to be a symbol too of sort of continuity. And that's a very positive message as well.
Yeah, the topic of luck has been present since the very beginning of the Maison. In fact, in the 1910s and 20s, we've made some jewels that are made of wood. And, touch wood is an act of, bringing luck. So we've also had a sentence in some of our creations saying to have luck, you have to believe in luck. And so, yes, the clover is definitely one also of the sources of references to luck.
There are roughly 90 pieces in the exhibition.
So the exhibition showcases nearly 100 pieces, original from the patrimonial collection, as well as private loans and original drawings. We have nearly 30 drawings from our archives that accompany the exhibition. So you can see other references or the creative process behind the jewellery.
And how important do you think it is for a brand to have something like we're talking about movement and the ballerinas? How important is it for a brand to have that recognisable symbol or motif in their history?
Well, for Van Cleef Arpels, the patrimony and the different sources of inspiration, as you can see in the exhibition, are constant and continuously reinterpreted across time. So every creation that we make today will always start from the patrimonial perspective. Not to copy it, not to do the same as in the past. On the contrary, to know your past, to know who you are, to know what your predecessors have done in order to freely reinterpret and recreate the creations of today. So the patrimony is here to anchor, to nurture, to share, to educate, and to bring an understanding, of course, to our audience more broadly through exhibitions, but to our design studio and our workshop internally to create the creations of tomorrow.
So the heritage is everything.
The heritage is the core. And I think this is why you can see some common threads throughout time. It's because the Maison has consistently referred to its past in order to create today. Jewels are part of art. They are creations that are artistic creations. That's the purpose, to show that. And I think the show does show. I mean, I hope you agree, but that's really what we try to share.
It's really shining a light on the design, as you say, because how do you get that movement into a piece? You have to think about the design and the use of it and the volume and the shape and the form and almost make the ballerina skirts billow, make them move with them.
Yeah. And it gives a sense of eternity as well. How do you capture this fleeting moment? And because that's what's striking when you look at the pieces, you think, they're still. They're made of metals, they're made of stones, very hard, very difficult to work. And yet, when you look at them, they're alive.
They are alive, and they are like fabric. They're like fabric.
It's amazing. It's really amazing.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Lise, for talking us through the exhibition and opening up the doors to the Place Vendôme and Van Cleef Arpels.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. For more information about this and other episodes of If Jewels Could Talk, please go to our website, carolwoolton.com/podcasts. And if you enjoyed it, share it any way that you can. Please subscribe to the podcast feed and leave us a rating or a comment. We'll be back soon. We've just come to the end of the 3rd season and we're back with a fantastic range of episodes. We'll be talking about the life of the world's greatest female jeweller, her life and work. We'll be talking about a fantastic collection created around one of the world's greatest rock stars. We'll be talking about the psychology of jewellery and desire. We'll be talking about big diamonds. We'll be talking about fashion and what's happening now. So please join us again. We'll keep you posted as to when we're back. And in the meantime, let us know any subjects that you would like to hear about. Thanks for joining us and for listening. Goodbye. If Jewels Could Talk with Carol Woolton is produced by Natasha Cowan, music and editing by Tim Thornton, graphics by Scott Bentley, illustration by Jordi Labanda, and you can find me on Instagram at Carol Woolton.